want to be very visible. Okay, first things first, hit Shift A to create a, let's say, circle. And the size of the geometry doesn't really matter. Actually, it does. 16 for our final 16 for our final geometry should be fine. I'm gonna grab the whole thing, pull it out. I'm gonna add a mirror modifier to it. And here we go. So now back in edit mode, I'm gonna just drag it up, rotate it, move it over here. Gonna kind of position my shape to coincide with this spherical shape. It's like more like a ellipsoid. And I'm gonna switch to vertex mode, extrude, and scale in only on X. So Shift X. So that'll give us this kind of gizmo. We'll bring it in a little bit. I'm gonna select everything, bring it down, kind of align it to this shape a little bit more. Just fit it so that the inside isn't really intersecting with the ellipsoid. And I'm gonna scale it in the Y direction to just kind of match the shape a little bit. And I'm just gonna keep rotating it until it fits how I want. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that it's above that, so that when I do add more detail, it fits where I want it to. And it's getting there. It's getting there. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to extrude in. And as you can tell, it is, the normals are not calculated in the correct direction. So select all, Control N to recalculate normals. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a ring here and another ring. Actually, I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to hit Control R, and I'm going to scroll wheel up to add a second loop, and I'm just going to do it this way. So we have that. I'm going to now switch to faces mode, select a ring of faces, and I'm going to extrude, scale, and hold down Shift X to scale only in the X axis. All right. So now I've got my kind of indented shape. All right. So it's kind of like the I'm trying to evoke a bathysphere here a little bit. I'm just going to rotate this a little bit. It seems to be positioned in a strange way. Okay. That's looking good. So the next thing I want to do is I want to add more geometry around the shape, which would be little little nuts. And to do that, I'm just going to create a cylinder with 6 sides. And I'm going to bring it out. I'm going to add my mirror modifier. And I'm going to scale it down. Scale it down. Rotate it. Scale it. Rotate it. Okay. Now I'm going to zoom in on it by hitting the period. Hit Shift D. I'm going to scale it. Move it back. So now it looks like there's a little, I'm not sure what this is called, but one of those things that makes it look slightly cooler. And that's really all we care about right now. Okay, gonna bring this in. And now let us start positioning these on our ring. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring it over here and kind of align it a little bit with the rest of the shape of our ring. Now I'm going to go back up here. I think I want to scale it down a little bit more. All right, I'm just going to add a few. 1, 2, Just kind of add them around. If I really wanted to make them even, I could create a curved circle and then just put an array modifier on them. But I am almost done here, and they're going to look kind of interesting. I'm excited, and I just got to pull them in and push them out at this point. So Control L to select linked, put that in, select linked, pull that in, select linked, pull these in. Oh, okay, that one is not. All right. Just gonna pull them in. Okay. Just putting them in. This is kind of zen. By zen, I mean I have no idea what I'm talking about. And by zen, yeah, no, I don't know zen at all. I literally have no idea what I'm saying. But I do know that this is slightly calming for me, which is kind of great. And I just gotta dig these ones out. Control L. Pull these ones out. Okay. Gonna go in here. Control L. Bring them out. That one's flipped. Huh. Guess I'm gonna have to just rotate it up top. Okay. Control L, rotate. Okay. So now I've got this dealy bopper on the side of my weapon. So now we have a lot of interesting things to look at if we're in first person mode. Okay. So for the next lesson, okay. So first things first, we are gonna compare this model to our original. So I'm gonna kind of close those, and we're gonna look at our original. Okay, so first things first, we have some flip normals. Got to go in here and flip them. Select it, Control N. Select all, Control N. Right click, select all, Control N. Right click, select all, Control N. Right click, select all, Control N. And this one also looks like a flipped little thing. And let's just make sure that everything is flipped properly. Oop. Just gonna go through all of them. Okay. So let's look at our parts. The parts that have not changed is this front bit, the gun barrel, but all this seems to have been sculpted. So what we need to do is we need to check. We actually need to set up a new mesh for this because we've changed it. We need to basically, I want to bring this over to the low poly mesh. So I'm going to select both of these, the nuts and the rings, nuts and the rings. And I'm going to hit Shift D and I'm going to move it to this layer. So this layer now has this aspect to it, and that is fine. That's good. So also to note is that, yeah, that this cuts in a little bit there. So I'm going to go down here and I'm actually going to move this up a little bit if it will let me. Okay, that should be perfect. Okay, so now let us move on to the little scalped parts. So here we are, and what we can do is we can take our low res version And I'm going to apply the modifier because it's just a mirror modifier. I'm going to copy it, and we're basically going to do the same thing that we did before with the shells, except we're just going to align this to these shapes. And that's going to be not super hard. You're just going to kind of stretch them and scale them and make them fit in this 3D space. Okay. Just got to rotate. Okay. So that is step one of that. And we just got to do that a bunch more times. I would say that's good enough. If we have a problem, we can always change it a little bit later. And copy, rotate, scale, rotate. And we want this one in here. Just got to keep kind of pushing it into place. All right, that's good enough. Let's copy our last one. Move this. And Control 1 will show us the opposite side of our view. And I'm just going to kind of make this fit. Okay. Yeah, rotate it along this axis, bring it up. So I'm rotating it in screen space. This is a awesome talent to have, and what I would suggest you do is practice this every day. Rotating 3D objects from the viewport like a crazy person, and that will help improve your spatial skills, specifically with modeling and all 3D, significantly. So that goes around that size and scale. And what's great is that because of the baking process, this doesn't have to be exact. And we can always clean it up later too. Okay, so this should be good enough. Gonna grab my low poly scallops and Shift D, move them over to our layer 1. And yeah, I'm just going to leave one side on for now because really, like, this whole thing is going to be a single-sided object anyways. Well, not single-sided, but like it's going to be mirrored with the exception of this and maybe another little flourish that we add later. Okay, so that seems to be in order. This is good. This is good. Let's see if there's anything else that we're missing. It's looking pretty good. And I think I want to go back up here and shift this up as well, just to kind of match what we did down here. We can check out numerics. So actually we can't because it's not telling us that our transform is off, even though it is. That's weird. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of manually do it. And close enough is good enough for this. Yeah, that's good. That only moved like half a pixel. Good, 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 good. Okay, so we have our low poly mesh, which is great. And the next big step we have to do is we have to unwrap all of this so that the baking can actually go somewhere. All right, I will build a resolution model to fit our new form. All right, let's get started. So first off, I'm going to switch to our high resolution model. I'm going to just move this one part. I'm going to right click on it, move it to layer 4. And then I'm going to go over here and start working on it. So first things first, I want to increase the subdivision level. So I'm going to hit Control-1 to add a single subsurf modifier to it. I'm going to hit Apply, and that's going to change our faces and tries to a nice 700,000. And now I'm going to hit N to remove our transform window, hit T to bring up our toolbox, switch into sculpt mode. And now I'm going to go to mask. I'm going to mask out the part I don't want to have be a wood texture. So I'm just going to kind of hold down this area. I'm going to have to increase with Shift F the strength of the mask effect. And I'm going to be a little sloppy right now because I'm just going to clean it up momentarily. And just going to get everything I don't want to have this texture on. And it's just gonna do a little bit of cleanup. Don't have to be super careful because we're dealing with a like what is a kind of pliable surface, and say like maybe this area over here is a little bit more sanded than the rest. All right. And really all I want to do is I want to have a touch of wood grain to this. So it's okay if there's a little bit of overlap, teeny tiny bit. I just want to get this area and cut this. That should be good. Okay, so we have our even higher resolution mesh, and actually, yeah, no, we're good. We're good. So now I'm going to go to my brush, and I'm going to create a new brush, and this is going to be just like before where we had a texture brush. I'm going to call it texture brush. And I'm going to get my texture, not going to be clouds. So I'm going to go all the way over here and Imager Movie, open, just like before, Wood H, opening up that height map, and we should have it all set up already. So brush map tiled, stroke space anchored. Now all I should have to do is increase this size, make it about this big. Shift F and lower, keep the intensity around there. Now click and drag. And just click and drag. Just keep doing it. And I'm just going to cover this wooden portion with this wood grain. What I like about the tiled mode and the screen space that it's in is that it keeps the grain aligned, which is what I want. And I'm just going to keep doing this because I mean, like, this would presumably be carved from one piece of wood, so the grain isn't really going to change too much because, well, that's not how that's how trees work. All right, and just about done. Want to bring up the detail over here and get some on the inside. Whew, it's a little much. Just kind of pull that out. I'm actually going to soften this a little bit too because I don't want it to be too dramatic because this object has been sanded and polished over the years by people handling it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my smooth brush and I'm just going to kind of smooth it out a little bit. And I'm going to keep it on a low setting and just smooth my shapes. Smooth that surface up and just keep going around and around and around and making sure that everything I have here is smooth. And I'm going to hit the surface down here and over here and just get it up here and beneath it as well. So now we have a more subtle wood grain texture, and I'm going to hit Alt-M. We're going to see it with our pommel, and we're going to look at it. It looks fine. Okay, so now let's look at it with the rest of our model, see if everything's okay. It's looking around the same detail level as the rest of it, and that's what I want. So now what I'm going to do is we're going to do a quick retopo. So down here, we're going to take this mesh and we're going to move it to the layer right below the other one. So low res mesh, to high-res mesh. And here, I'm just going to hit tab to go into edit mode, turn on snapping, turn on face select, and now I'm going to switch to vertex mode. I'm just going to drag our points around. And it should snap to, oh, it's snapping to increment. No, I want it to snap to faces. So that's a very important thing to have. So it's going to snap to the faces of our mesh nearby. And I'm just going to kind of reseed these points so that they are with the new volume. Because remember, we sculpted that out a little bit differently. And I'm just going to replant these pieces parts. And that is looking good. I think a little bit more curvature down here to help. So almost done. Retopo was easy when you plan ahead. If this was more of like a character or something and we had to build clothes and stuff, that might be more of a problem. But because this shape is, well, this shape, it's a little bit easier. And also that we created a solid base mesh before moving on to the sculpting. So all we have to do is really just match up these little points. And almost done. So the rest of the process should go pretty smoothly. And what that entails is UV unwrapping and starting a texture paint. Okay, and then baking maps, of course. So let's go back to object mode. Let's see what this looks like alongside our low-res mesh. So it's more in line with our high-res mesh, and I'm just going to pull this back. So high-res and our stock, low-res with the stock. And I'm going to select this and move it over. I'm going to go back to object mode and move it back to layer 1. Okay. So that is it for this lesson, and finally, I believe next lesson we will be able to start UV unwrapping. Check it out. Mesh, which is high polygon. I'm gonna go back down here, which is much more low polygon. We got about only 5,000 phases, 3,000 tries. That's perfectly reasonable for a gun. Okay, so let's do some checks on this. So first I want to check this, and I notice that we do not have what we need here. So I'm gonna move this to another layer. So move it to this layer for work, and I'm gonna go in here, and I am really thankful that we still have our our thing on, and I'm gonna select all these back faces, and we're gonna delete them because they're going to mess up with our normal baking, and they just won't really be seen. So I'm going to delete the faces, going to delete these faces as well. So just a couple rows of these hexes. And for the front-facing ones, we actually want to triangulate those because, well, we don't really need to, or we're actually going to need them triangulated so that we can, you know, put it into the game engine. So we're doing cleanup of our assets. So selecting the front-facing faces, front-facing ones, and I'm just going to zoom in over here so we can have a better angle. And just going to select them. So this is kind of important to do this. Okay, so now Control T to triangulate, and they've all triangulated roughly the same way, but we want them triangulated so that they don't retriangulate when entering the game mesh, the game engine, because we want them to be triangulated in the way that we want them to be, so they don't change per import or anything fun like that. Okay, so this is going to stay the same. That's good. moving it back to our low res mesh. And let's check this. This one looks like it's fine. Let's go to our high res mesh. Let's actually add a subsurf to this. Let's say level 2 to make it a little bit smoother. And let us continue down the path, the checklist that I have of things to look at and make sure are fine. So this is quads, this is good. Making sure everything is fine there. I'm going to check to see if there's any scale and rotation problems. I see that there are, so I'm going to apply my object transform, and I'm going to apply my rotation and scale. Is my position funny as well? Yes, I'm going to do that also. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Apply object transform. Do the same thing with this one. Apply object transform. Same thing here. Apply object transform. I'm going to check all of my pieces parts to see and make sure that they all have their transforms zeroed, because that's going to bug us a bit later. Let's see. Even the pommel. Nope. I gotta fix this one. Good thing I checked. Boop. Alright. So everything should be good to go on this end. And let's check here. Yeah, that's fine. So now I guess what we can do is start UV unwrapping. And what I want to do is I actually want to do it from this setup, and as in like in multiple pieces so that we can rearrange them later. But first I'm going to clean up my scene. I'm going to get rid of this. I don't need it anymore. Delete. I'll switch to this. I don't think I need this anymore. I'm just going to keep it around just in case. And let's check these. This is the high-res version of that, which is already there, but they're separated. Don't need them anymore. Delete. You can always separate them later. This one, we don't need this anymore. We have all those copies. And yeah, we don't need these anymore either because we have the ones in the mesh. Actually, I want to keep this one. And I'm going to just delete these. Okay. So what we're left with is our mesh is now just about ready to unwrap. Let's start unwrapping. So I'm going to hit N to give us a bigger workspace. I'm going to right click here, down here, split the area, and I'm going to start working in the UV image editor. All right. So unwrapping in Blender is actually kind of the greatest thing ever. So for this, and also what's cool is because we're working in mirror mode, there's a seam running down the center. And I mean, most of the time you want to hide it, but if you're mirroring the model anyways, that's fine. So I'm going to hit unwrap, and it kind of did a good job. So I'm going to actually grab this piece and drag it off to the side and kind of shrink it down a little bit. Actually, no. Let's leave it here. That unwrapped fine. Let's move on to the next one, the shield at the top. Let's see, we have some area that we don't really need to see, so we're going to actually delete these. I'm going to move this to another layer, and we're going to work on cleaning up this mesh. And let's move to layer 2, or Alt 2. And we don't need this inner row, I believe, because it's just redundant, and no one's going to see it anyways. But I do want to be careful because we will be seeing this from all angles, and I'm going to turn back my other layer and just check. Yeah, I'm just going to be very careful with those inside-facing polys. Here we should be fine. Yeah, here we're fine. I'm going to check our gun stock. Okay, let's just move it to another layer just in case. Move it here. And yes, we're all set with this. Let's check our trigger. Fine. Actually, yeah. Let's edit. Let's get rid of these faces. And delete faces. That should be fine. These inside facing phases, don't need them. Okay, let us combine everything back together. Okay, that should be enough cleanup for now. And we've already UV unwrapped our first thing, which is kind of cool. This is it still a array? Yes, it's still an array. Okay. So what we need to do is we need to apply the modifiers. And now we have our fancy little array thing going on. And is it all connected? Control L. Yes. So, like I said thousands of years ago in an earlier lesson, we the verts merged and helped us out later. Hooray! Okay. And now, in the next lesson, we will be UV unwrapping the rest of our model and going through and showing you how to test it and see if it's correctly unwrapped to your specifications. All right, back at our little blob thingy. So, important thing to note is that we're going to add a new texture. So, new, and then let's say 2048 by 2048, which is kind of normal for high definition meshes at this point. Let's call this UV checker, and we're going to change our generated type to color grid. Hooray! I love color grid. Check this out. So it's going to generate this crazy thing here, and we're going to use this to see if our texel density is where we want it. So now I can hit texture, and now we should be able to see our texel density. And it's fairly even. There's like a little bit of warping. Yeah, but it should be fine. Okay, and let's just keep working on the rest of our mesh. So down here I switched from solid to textured mode. I'm just going to go back. And I'm going to go here. And I'm going to unwrap this. So U for unwrap. And let's see if this thing came out fine. And the important part is I'm just going to keep checking to see if our texel density lines up. It's about the same size, about the same amount of warping. In the visible areas, we're a little good. Things are good. Okay, moving on to the next one. Our sphere thingy, which should unwrap pretty well. Actually, you have to select everything and then unwrap it. It only unwraps what you have selected. So I want to check these poles to make sure that they are just single verts. And yeah, looks like it. Cool. This is kind of going by like a miracle. I am excited by how easy this is. Okay. So this might be a little bit more difficult. Okay, unwrap. Oh geez. So this is going to be a little bit harder, but as long as it looks good out here, we should be fine. And it kind of does. Okay. As long as it matches up with its area. So our ring thing. So our ring thing is probably going to be the first thing that we have to actually make some cuts to. And let's move it to another layer so we can work on it easier. Moving over here to 4, and let's check this out. Okay, so generally for a ring of some sort, I would like to slice it up into a few parts. So usually the edges where it's facing, like each, pretending like a cube is unwrapping this thing. And there's a little tool over here that we can use to, I'll show you that later if we need it. But you can actually change the way it, the Alt right click option, which is a selection mode, we can actually have it tag seams instead. And that'll allow us to quickly unwrap more unusual shapes. But something like this where we can just take a loop and then hit Control E and mark a seam. That's easy. I'm just going to keep doing that. Control E, mark seam, and then actually here, hold on, I'll show you this. So now I can show it to you. So over here, unless they moved it, create UVs, no, options, edge select mode. Select or tag seam. Let's do that. Now, if we Alt right click or Control Alt right click, it's doing something weird. I'm going to go back to just select and go back to just tagging seams like I normally would. So I'm just going to select this, just select these little edges, and actually, no, I don't want to search. I want to Control E, mark seam, and I'm going to do that again. Actually, that is not the correct position for the seam because it's going to be very visible. So let's put it down here. And let's make sure to select all of these. Sorry, gotta remember to hit period to align our viewport to selection and not apply object transform. Control E, mark seam. All right, so that's pretty cool, and we can do the same for the inside. Control E, mark seam. Control E, mark seam. And also let's cut this one too. Control E, mark seam. Now, when we select it all and hit unwrap, should create these strips and these little circles, which should represent our shape. And we can, there's actually some cool options that we can check. So angle base, we can switch it to conformal, and it'll switch how it generates the meshes a little bit. We can fill holes, correct aspect, and if we have a subsurface, making sure that it takes that into account. We are not going to be subsurfing because we don't really do that in our game engine. And margin is pretty important because we can show how much of a distance there are between the islands, and we're going to get more into that later because of MIP mapping. But this should be fine for right now. So this is now textured and looking all right. Let's move it back to our other mesh, our low resolution mesh. Go back over here. That's there. And where did our shield go? There's our shield. Let's unwrap this mesh. Again, it's all pretty easy because we have our mesh kind of already chunked up. So it's really the way we designed our mesh to begin with is what is causing it. So I'm going to create a seam here. Actually, I shouldn't make a seam there because there's a little bit there. It's right here that I want to get the seam. So Control E, mark seam, and now we should have two little parts. We have the part that encases the pommel, and we have the part over here. And that should be it for that. So let us continue onwards, and let's actually move these parts back to our original layer so we can see what other parts we got to do. The gun barrel. So this might be a little interesting. Let's actually move this to another layer so we can work on it. Let's move it to the second layer. I'm going to hit T to get rid of that. Okay, so let's unwrap it and see what happens. Okay. So we have this crazy thing going on here, and I'm going to free this mesh from this big foot thing. And that should be fairly easy. I got to hit period to align it. And actually, this might be a little bit of an issue. So I'm going to select these loops, hide them, and now I see my culprit edges. And I'm going to hit Control E, mark seam, Alt H to unhide, select all, U, unwrap, and now everything's working out a little bit better. I see that this is still acting up, but in our next lesson we will come and fix that. All right.